Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to jump into the fascinating story of the UK's economy over the last 75 plus years. And we're going to look at it all through one really specific lens: government policy. I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? And for the UK, well, the answer has been all over the place. The strategy has had to change, and change radically, in response to some pretty massive challenges, from rebuilding after a world war to facing off against global competition. Okay, so our story kicks off right after the Second World War. Britain needed to rebuild, and the government's big idea at the time was to take direct control of the country's most vital industries. This was the era of nationalization. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The goal right after the war, it was pretty noble, right? You wanted to protect jobs, prop up heavy industry, and just get some stability back. But you fast forward a few decades to the 1970s, and, well, the picture looks completely different. Those same industries were really struggling with old machinery, inefficient ways of working, and some seriously fierce competition from abroad. And we're not talking about small companies here. We're talking about the absolute bedrock of the British economy: coal, steel, the railways. They were all brought under state control. You had these massive state-run organizations like the British Steel Corporation, all designed to manage these industries and keep people in jobs. But by the time the 70s rolled around, the whole plan just wasn't working anymore. Those problems, they snowballed into a full-blown crisis. What we saw was widespread factory closures, unemployment numbers that just kept climbing, and a lot of social unrest, especially in the country's industrial heartlands. Something had to give. The stage was set for a massive change. And that change came crashing in 1979. A new government, led by Margaret Thatcher, brought in a completely different way of thinking about the economy. It was all about the free market. You could say the age of state control was officially over, and the age of privatization was just getting started. So, what is privatization? Well, it's basically the exact opposite of what came before. Instead of the government owning these massive industries, the new policy was to sell them off to private companies and, let the market work its magic. And they did not waste any time. Huge household names that had been run by the state for decades were suddenly on the auction block. One of the very first to go was the national phone company, British Telecom. And right after that, the nation's airline, British Airways, was sold off too. This was a move that really made headlines all around the world. And it didn't stop there. Even essential utilities like British Gas were sold. The sheer scale of it all was a clear signal. This wasn't a temporary fix. It was a fundamental, permanent change to how the British economy worked. And this chart, wow, it just shows you the impact so clearly. As privatization sped up the decline of those old, heavy industries, the workforce began to shift dramatically. Manufacturing jobs went down, and jobs in the service sector, we're talking finance, retail, that kind of thing, they just started to rocket upwards. And if you want a perfect example of this transformation, just look at the London Docklands. What used to be this landscape of old, dying industrial docks was totally reimagined. It became this new, gleaming global hub for finance and business. Canary Wharf basically rose from the ashes of the old economy and became the symbol of the new one. All right, let's bring it into the modern era. From around 2010 onwards, a new challenge started to take center stage, especially after the 2008 financial crisis showed just how risky things could get. The thinking was that the pendulum had swung maybe a bit too far. The UK was now seen as way too reliant on its service sector, and it had created this huge economic gap between London and, well, pretty much the rest of the country. This chart really tells the story. See that massive slice for the service sector? It makes up something like 80% of the UK's entire economic output. When policymakers talk about an unbalanced economy, this is exactly what they mean. The big goal became trying to make the economy more resilient and less dependent on just one sector and, really, one city. So how do you even begin to do that? Well, the strategy has a few different parts. It's about trying to boost modern, high-tech manufacturing in areas like aerospace and renewables. It's about investing in big infrastructure projects to connect the country better. It's about helping small businesses grow with grants and loans, and it's all under this big idea called leveling up, basically investing in the regions outside of London. Now, a huge piece of that leveling up puzzle is the Northern Powerhouse idea. The whole point is to try and turn the great cities in the north of England, like Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds, into their own engines of economic growth by pumping an investment to attract new industries and create those high-skilled jobs. And there's no better example of both the ambition and the challenges of all this than the story of the HS2 rail project. The original dream was this high-speed line connecting London with northern cities to shrink that economic divide. But in 2023, the leg north of Birmingham got canceled because the costs were just spiraling. The new promise is to reinvest that money into other transport projects in the north. It just goes to show how these massive plans can change and evolve over time. So after that trip through the decades, let's just zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. What we've really seen are three very distinct eras, each one defined by its own big problem and the government's bold solution to fix it. And here it is, laid out plain and simple. From 1945 to 79, the problem was industrial decline. The fix was state control. Then from 79 to 2010, the problem was seen as inefficient state industries, so the solution was the free market and privatization. And since 2010, the big problem has been this unbalanced, London-focused economy, and the proposed solution is rebalancing and leveling up. Each of these big ideas was a reaction to what people thought were the failures of the one before. And that leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. After seeing this cycle of problem and solution play out for over 75 years, what comes next? What's going to be the next big economic challenge? And what new policy idea is going to come along to try and solve it?